Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 41 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris, coming at you solo again this week since Colton is getting ready for his wedding. So, should be probably within the next two episodes. He'll be back. He's got his honeymoon, and so obviously more important things with him going on right now. But for ASU, nothing really, not a whole bunch of concrete stuff has happened in Sun Devil World and in the last 2 weeks since I last recorded. But we'll get to some stuff that did happen and honestly some dive into some conference realignment rumors that could see ASU and U of A maybe not even playing in the same conference in the coming years, and just how weird that would be. What are other examples of rival schools in different conferences around the country? It would just be completely unprecedented if it did happen, and we'll get into that. But first, I want to get into some newsy stuff. The biggest thing that did happen to ASU sports, I guess, in the past 2 weeks is the baseball team getting snubbed from the NCAA tournament. Obviously, I don't know, I think it's the second round of the playoffs is happening this upcoming weekend. ASU won't be involved. Pretty sure U of A isn't involved, and that's one of the teams that got in over ASU. Look, U of A beat them 20-0 in the fourth regular season matchup of the year, and then they beat ASU in the first game of the Pac-12 tournament. So they do deserve that recognition. But U of A finished with a worse overall record. ASU finished the season 32-23, U of A 33-26. So 9 games above 500 versus 7. ASU went 16-13 in the Pac-12. U of A went 12-18. And then ASU won the season series because ASU swept them earlier in the season. So it just doesn't really make sense how they didn't get in. There was a lot of bad choices made by the baseball committee. They didn't let USC in. USC got screwed worse than even ASU did. Okay. And I do not like USC, but it's true. USC, guess what? They had a better conference record and overall record than both Arizona schools, and USC swept Arizona State late in the year. I don't know how they did against U of A, but they did better in conference overall. So USC got screwed. Kansas State got screwed. I think with the baseball tournament, there's just way less attention given to it, the selection process compared to the NCAA basketball tournament, where there's, sports radio freaks out about it the next 2 days and then we move on. But that's just how it is. It also didn't help that there were two bid stealers in the lower levels. I think Charlotte was one of them, and I'm pretty sure Tulane was the other, but I can't remember, and really it doesn't matter. But overall, in the end, ASU left out. But I'm glad I mentioned in my previous video that I'm still happy with what this team did. And going to the NCAA tournament and most likely losing in the first round doesn't really change, the whole picture for me. I still think they have good momentum going forward. Bloomquist is a good coach. They played to about, what their talent was this year. So, and maybe a little bit above that. So, overall, I think the program took a good step and they were good enough to be in the NCAA tournament. I think that's fair to say. Probably if the bid steal, I think they were listed as the last team out. So, or the first team out. So if one of those bid stealers doesn't happen, they probably do get in, but oh well, looking good for the future regardless. Also, this was about a week ago. The first few kickoff times were announced for ASU football. So we don't have any for the conference season just yet. But first three games have all been announced. They are all night games, which some like that better than others. But in Arizona in September, I think it's wise to have them all at night. So first game, August 31st, Thursday. Southern Utah, 7 p.m. kickoff in Sun Devil Stadium. That'll be broadcast on the Pac-12 network. Fine by me. I'm personally happy this game is on a Thursday because then, as an ASU fan, you can watch that game, and then on the Friday and the Saturday, and I think they have Sunday games this year too. You can just fully dive into all the rest of college football, knowing that ASU most likely beat up on an FCS team. Then in week 2, Oklahoma State comes to town. Kickoff at 7:30 p.m. That'll be on FS1. Seems about right. I'm excited for that game. They have it as a blackout. I think this could be the first real moment for Kenny Dillingham's team to like put themselves on the map. Like, let's say if ASU wins that game, let's say they win that game by like 14 points or more, could you be ranked? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not. Probably not. I don't think that Oklahoma State is, going to be regarded super highly, but it would be a very good start to the season. And then the following Saturday, you get a group of 5 team, but it's Fresno State. They're pretty good. They probably won't be as good as they were last year with Jake Hayner, but Jeff Tedford's still there. That's a good group of 5 team that can beat you. And that kicks off 7:30 p.m. Saturday, September 16th. That will also be on FS1. So, I think that's a good beginning stretch to the season for Kenny Dillingham. He will obviously be the most inexperienced coach in those games with Mike Gundy and Jeff Tedford on the opposite sideline, but those look really fun, and I do think the Fresno State game is very tricky, especially if you come off an emotional win over Oklahoma State. That that that's a trap game waiting to happen, at least in my opinion. And this will be an interesting test for Dillingham because there is a I could see 3-0, I could see 2-1, and I could see 1-2. I don't think they're going to lose to an FCS team. If last year's team didn't do it, I don't think this year's team would. But Oklahoma State and Fresno State, those are I think those are both winnable games, but they're also losable games. And obviously, that sounds kind of dumb, but like the following game, they host USC. I don't really think that's a winnable game. I think that's the USC game. You're hoping. I would be very happy if it was a game where like ASU was like down. It was like one of those games where the USC is leading by about like 10 points for a good chunk of the game, but it never feels like ASU is totally out of it, and ASU ends up losing 49-39 or something. I think that would be a good, like, okay, like we're not as good as USC, that's fine, but we made them sweat. We made their fans think this could be a loss for a second, and then after that, you're at Cal and you host Colorado. Those as an ASU, as an ASU fan, you don't want to lose either of those games, depending on Colorado just totally being awesome. With Dion, we'll see. So anyway, first 3 games, all night games, all at home. I think this is a good. I think if you're Kenny Dillingham, you can't be upset with that at all. And obviously the opponents were known already, but just finally getting it known that they're gonna be on night games. No streaming either, which I'd be fine with streaming. I don't really care, but a lot of people would rather it just be on FS1. So that's good, especially for the Fresno State. You never know with the group of 5 and just how all the games are being divvied up between the regular TV stations and then the streamers. It's it's becoming harder and harder to find where your team's games are. I mean, Michigan State and Washington are going to be playing on Peacock in week 3. So like, it's changing world out there, very changing in the TV sports media rights sphere, which we're going to get to tangentially after I have a little sip of water because I'm battling a cold and I don't want to cough a bunch while I'm doing this podcast. All right. Anyway, if you are watching this channel, you are almost certainly also paying attention to the ongoing Pac-12 media deal saga, quest to get a deal done, whatever phrase you want to use to describe it. It's still going on. And in light of all that, Arizona's president, I forget what he was speaking at. I think it was some like NIL summit on the East Coast, but it doesn't really matter where he was because he gave some quotes about ASU and U of A in a realignment scenario. This is from Pete Thamel on Twitter. Quote, "We don't have to do the same thing, but President Crow and I are very, very tight. I think it would be unlikely that we'd split up right now with 10 schools. We control a nice 20% of solidarity. Following tweet, he adds that he does have the autonomy to move without ASU. So he also goes on to say on a Pac-12 deal, we'll get there when we get there. I think it's going to be soon. Kind of the same thing you've heard from president. It's going to be soon. It's coming, whatever. He also adds, quote, "I'm not anxious about this. I know it's important. I have full confidence we're going to get where we need to be." Said he's cautiously optimistic. Also, another quote, "We're not going to get a Big Ten deal or an SEC deal. If we win a bronze medal, I think we'll declare victory and move on." So they're hoping to get the third best number of any of the conferences out there. We'll see how that goes, if it even happens. And one reason it might not happen is if schools leave or if the TV deal, the final TV deal, media rights deal that they get isn't good enough money-wise. But does that mean all the schools, all the four corner schools will leave together? How UW and Washington will react? And I don't want to say likely, but it's looking more and more likely that there is a real chance that ASU and U of A could be split up into different conferences via conference realignment. And so if it seems like there's a lot more buzz about Arizona going to the Big 12 than there is Arizona State. Arizona State hasn't really budged in the statements, the PR. There hasn't been a little side comment of, and we'll do what's best for the school, or we'll see how things shake out, or whatever. It's been, we're committed to the Pac-12 as one of the 10, as one of the 10 remaining schools. Ray Anderson recently said that on the Speak of the Devils podcast. Any statement from Ray Anderson or Michael Crow has been, we're committed to the Pac-12. We want to get this deal done. And believe we can move forward with the conference and yada, yada, yada. Arizona's been mostly that, but there's been a little bit more of, we'll see what we need to do. Robert Robbins wasn't exactly, a lot of these were not committal statements. If you go look up on Pete Thamel's Twitter feed, and, if they do leave, then he'll have these statements saying, oh, we thought the deal was going to get done. And so we didn't say that we're 100% going to go, or basically speaking in generalities, not fully committal language that won't get them, possibly sued later on. And of course, these school presidents are mindful of that. So that's why when you can't always just believe on face value these public statements that are coming from school presidents and high-ranking officials, because sometimes there's a different message they're trying to send, and other times they're just trying to say some stuff to get people to get off their case for a little bit, because maybe they don't even have an answer of what's going on, which a lot of times it feels like the Pac-12 has been in that situation. And so if Arizona, obviously the Big 12 is going to have a better men's basketball product than the Pac-12. That's almost, there's no real argument there. And because Arizona is a basketball school, they have been rumored, along with Colorado, who has some sense to join there's reason for them to join the Big 12. They've been there before, offers more security than what many think the Pac-12 may or may not have. It would just get them. It would take them out of this whole mess. They're just in the Big 12, and that conference is stable because it looks like there aren't really, the Big 10 and SEC aren't really going after those teams, or there's not rumors of them going after those teams. So going back to the Big 12 offers stability. There's familiarity there because they've played Oklahoma State a bunch before. They've played Kansas. They played Kansas State, Iowa State, Baylor, Texas Tech before. And so it's not like totally, jumping in to a completely foreign conference. Arizona, it seems like if you ask most Arizona fans, they want to go to the Big 12, mainly due to basketball. Their school president, wasn't fully committal to it, but he wasn't fully uncommittal to. He left it open both ways. I'll put it that way. Even though his quote is, "My prediction is that we're all going to stay together as the Pac-12." So there's definitely less smoke around Arizona going, as of June 8th than there is Colorado. It seems like Colorado's really generating most of the buzz right now. And weirdly, UConn is as well. And this little side tangent away from ASU, Arizona potentially being in different conferences, but I don't understand the logic of the Big 12 adding UConn, because it's based on some reports, like they would have to add them as a full member. And that means adding UConn football to your Power 5 football conference. I mean, I don't know about that. That's it. That could really, really screw up your brand. I mean, that could really mess up your branding as a football conference, because there's a reality. You just have some bottom feeding programs in the Big 12. And I know Kansas was good last year, and I know Iowa State's been good with Campbell, and West Virginia has been good. They've been good before, but a lot of those schools have not they have low floors. They can be bad, and it's not super surprising. Like if Oklahoma State all of a sudden went 2-10 2 years from now, people would be surprised about that. If even with Baylor where they're at, BYU even. But with a lot of these schools, and look, you have some group of 5 schools joining the league too. So anyway, you add UConn. I just think it's one more potential, just a very bad program in your league. And I understand that they just, they're a great basketball school. And I get what Mark's idea is of nailing down being the best basketball conference. But if UConn, just their football program has to be better, in my opinion, to make it worthwhile. If they had, what's a group of 5 school I could sub in? If they were App State's football program, or because the thing is they went 6-6 last year, and that was considered to be their program's on the up and up. They went 6-6 playing a group of 5 schedule. It's like, okay, that's, for one, that shows you how low the bar has been there. They don't have an on-campus stadium, by the way. And, they've just been so bad for, this whole past decade. And so I can, there's a report of an AD in the Big 12 not wanting to add, or, being worried about adding UConn, and I get it. So anyway, end of that tangent. Regardless, when you add it all up, it's looking like where, there were some reporting and some of the rumors is that the Big 12 may just add Colorado and Arizona. There's a reality where schools leave the Pac-12, but it's not all of the 4 corner schools. It's just Colorado and Arizona, because Utah doesn't want to leave. I think Utah doesn't want to leave more than Arizona State. It seems like, they've had their athletic director was dunked on someone on Twitter this was a few months ago, of them spreading, oh, Utah's going to come to the Big 12 rumors and stuff. So they really don't want to join the Big 12 because they don't want to be with BYU. And I don't know all the dynamics of that rivalry. I know that Utah left BYU to join the Pac-12, 12 years ago. So I know that, but there's a lot of, that's a real, there's some real hatred in that rivalry. And both of those fan bases have strong Twitter fingers. And or not BYU, Utah fans have made it very clear on social media that they don't want to join the Big 12, and they're hoping the Pac-12 survives. And it seems like ASU, it seems like the fan base is a little, I don't know, it's very, very half and half on that front. But the sports administration has been basically clear that we want to stay with the Pac-12 and we are confident the deal will get done and all this. And, they could very much just go with Arizona to the Big 12 if the Pac-12 collapses too. And they were just saying that just to say it, you have to, like I said, you have to take all of these public comments with a grain of salt. But we also have to remember that Michael Crow is the ultimate Pac-12 truther, for better, for worse, mostly worse, because there's part of me as a fan that just kind of wants, because I want the Pac-12 to survive. I really do. I think it can. And I think, especially if Oregon and Washington don't leave for the Big Ten. But I do understand that things may happen and ASU might have to leave. And I don't want ASU to just stick around in the Pac-12 if it's just, like them in Utah and Oregon State, Washington State, and the Bay Area schools. Like, no, just go to the Big 12 and deal with it, But Michael Crow, it seems like he is wanting to hold on to the very last minute because he is the ultimate like Pac-12 sports brain guy where men's golf matter, a championship in men's golf matters the same as a championship in football, or that type of mindset that most fans just don't prioritize and don't agree with. So it's just different priorities from the school president, and therefore I don't even want to say the athletic director, because I think Ray does want to win in the main sports. I don't think you would hire Herm Edwards, honestly. Like, that was such an out of the box move. It was so unconventional that it makes me think that he really, Ray Anderson really thought it would work and it would win. And, he said we wanted to be a top 15 team in the nation every year, top 3 in the Pac-12. And at Herm Edwards' opening press conference, he said that, and therefore we're going to hire, Herm Edwards to make that happen. And I still can't believe that decision was made. It just, obviously it wasn't going to fully work out. I don't even want to get into that right now. But I do think Ray Anderson is competitive, but he's just been misguided with some things. But anyway, Michael Crow, like, he is like I said, he's the ultimate Pac-12 guy. He was the one who basically like vouched for Larry Scott till the bitter end. And that's why I'm not like fully, trustworthy of him in this whole process. But I think it's just important to have that in the back of your mind when you see a report of ASU is going to go to the Big 12 with Utah. It's like ASU and Utah are the two least rumored, or not rumored, but from their end, they want the Big 12 less than the Big 12 wants them. And I think that's true for both Colorado and Arizona too. But I just think that it seems like they're warming up to it a little bit more, and Arizona's fan base definitely wants to go to the Big 12, and some of their media do too. And so what would it look like if it actually did happen? Let's just say Oregon and Washington stay in the Pac-12, along with Arizona State and Utah, and then the 4 other Pac-12 North teams, and maybe you add some other teams. Let's say there is a Pac-X conference that survives with Oregon, Washington, Arizona State, and Utah. And then Colorado and Arizona still bolt to the Big 12. So What for one, it wouldn't be unprecedented at all. As much as it would feel, in Arizona, obviously would be a total, shock to the sports system of having those schools that have been, in the same conference basically for their entire history and have been rivals for their entire history be in separate conferences. But I mean, I'm just going to do this off the top of my head. Cal, UCLA, get same, regent system. They will be in separate conferences. Clemson, ACC, South Carolina, SEC. Kentucky, SEC, ACC has Louisville. Oklahoma State, Big 12, Oklahoma, SEC. Texas and Texas Tech, SEC. Texas Tech, Big 12. Ohio State this is a little different because Ohio State and Cincinnati aren't like exactly huge rivals. Like there's probably more of a rival on the Cincinnati end. But they are, public universities in Ohio, and they are in separate conferences, and it's been that way for a while. And there's more examples out there, but it's not completely like it would be weird, like especially on the West Coast where there's just less conferences because there's less people, less population density. All these teams have been in the Pac-12 or the Mountain West or whatever, so it would be a little more jarring. But it's not it's gotten to the point where it's not like some crazy suggestion, and I think in football all it really changes is like the date of when the Territorial Cup is played. It may be much more difficult to have the Territorial Cup on the last weekend of November or the last, Friday, whenever they have it. But maybe you just have it the third week of the season and you get it out of the way before conference play. That's what another state example, Iowa State. This may be the most famous because it's been the longest. Iowa State's been in the Big 8, Big 12 forever, and Iowa's been in the Big 10, and there's still a state rivalry and they still play. So it can be done. It would take away from some of the like end of the year, like we build up to the rivalry game type of deal. But I think it could be done in the third weekend of September, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would just change things. And in all reality, if I don't know if like ASU is in the Pac-12 and U of A is in the Big 12 and U of A goes, maybe they're only there for like 5 years earlier than ASU. And so it'll just have a few September results if you're looking in the Wikipedia page down the road of ASU sweeps, no. ASU wins the Territorial Cup this year, and in September 16th, and the next year it was U of A on September 15th, and yada yada. And then maybe the schools end up in the same conference down the road, and they just played at the end of the year. This is a little bit more interesting for basketball. I do want to. There's one more talking. I heard that people would be like, "Oh, it could take away any." If you don't play the Territorial Cup football game at the end of the year, it could take away, who's in line to win the Pac-12 South. It could take away, meaningful games at the end of the year. And we've seen enough of these ASU U of A football games at the end of the year that it is more than likely not a case where both teams are fighting for the same thing. There's only one example I can think of in my head, and that's the 2014 Territorial Cup, which was for the Pac-12 South. Like if that happened more often, then sure, yeah, that would be great if we had. Well, then it would be. I'm sorry, it wouldn't be great. It would be much worse to have that game played, in September. But it's almost always. I feel like it's mostly, last year it was 2 below 500 teams that played. A lot of years it's been ASU's fighting to get from 6-5 to 7-5, and U of A is trying to get from 3-8 to 4-8, or the other way around, or it's a 6-5 U of A team playing an 8-3 Arizona State team, and one team goes 8-4 and one team goes 7-5. Or my point is it's usually like the biggest stakes is someone's playing for bowl eligibility you know, 6-5 Arizona State's playing a 4-7 U of A team, and those aren't the most exciting games outside of Arizona. And so I just don't buy this. Oh, it'll take away all these great games down the road with all the stakes. It's like, there haven't really been stakes in these games anyway. So what's the difference between playing it in September and late November? That's how I look at it. But I think the biggest adjustment would be for basketball. Because it means, obviously not 2 games, and there could be years where they just don't play, especially if ASU enters a real downturn in basketball, which is always capable of happening at ASU. And so that, again, that's goes into my defense of Bobby Hurley, because at least he gives you a floor that isn't always there at ASU basketball. Anyway, let's say they're really in a down stretch and they just have a few. Hurley leaves, let's say like 5 years from now, Hurley's not there. They've had just some bad coaching hires. They're just a bad program. They're like what Cal basketball was or what Oregon State basketball has been. U of A is just not going to play Arizona State, because what's the point? Like they're always going to be good, and they're always going to be looking to buff up their non-conference schedule. And maybe saying they won't play is a little too reactionary, fearmonger-y. But it's possible. I mean, they don't have to play, and I get that it would only have to be 1 game, but if there becomes such a huge discrepancy in the quality of the basketball programs, then it becomes on the table of U of A just saying, you know what, like we don't have to play them. We're not in the same conference. We also don't know, like, if they were to switch conferences, how the feelings between the schools would be, so just something to think about as we continue to wait for the Pac-12 media deal that has been going on since, I don't know, basically almost a year now, I guess, if you think about it, since USC and UCLA left late June of 2022, and now we're on, early June of 2023. So it's been dragging on for a while, and the security doesn't seem to be there. So you can see why schools are, doing their due diligence, making sure they have, some place to land. I'm sure ASU has done the same, but it does seem like ASU is less receptive of going to the Big 12 than U of A, and therefore there's a chance that they could be playing in different conferences. And it would be sad just in terms of the whole, like, for me, it would be more sad in terms of what it's shown about college sports as a whole than actually losing in conference games between U of A. And that's just me, but because they would still play the football territorial cup, so that makes it, to me, that makes it less of a gash, I guess. But for a lot of fans, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, for a lot of fans, it would be much, much worse, especially, more traditional college sports fans who the rivalry is so important. It would be really bad. And so, and, for me, it's just, it also shows where the college sports landscape is, and the fact that these things happen at all, I mean, ask an Oklahoma State fan or Texas Tech fan or whoever, it's never breaking up with this, in-state school. However it happens, it's usually not because great things are happening around. So it's crazy that we're at this point. I still think the Pac-12 will probably survive, but it may not be. We just don't know. We just don't know, including myself. So I'm really wouldn't be surprised if they both stayed together in the Pac-12, both moved together to the Big 12, or there was a split. So crazy times out there, and I'm sure, I was about to say, I'm sure by the time we have a next episode, we'll have more information on this, but I've said that for about the last few months, and seemingly nothing has changed. So here we are. All right. Well, that concludes episode 41. Thank you for stopping by and listening, consuming, watching on YouTube, putting up with my nasally voice today. And yeah, please like, rate, review, subscribe on YouTube, and thank you for watching, and as always, go Devils.